peeps. Today we're going to be talking about how can I say this? How LDS singles can deal with bitterness due to the single state. Join the Journey Radio starts right now.
Welcome to the infusion of positive energy into the lives of single Latter-day Saints everywhere. This is Joy in the Journey Radio.
And welcome back, peeps, to another wonderful, splendiferous, joyous episode. We are here today. Sorry for being a little late. Had some things I was trying to take care of and get ready for the program today. So I'm going to be kind of off the cuff. Like usually I got something that's more scripted, but today I'm going to be off the cuff today. So, yeah, I'm just going to be off the cuff today. So for those of you who are just joining us for the first time, I'm Lance, your host for Join the Journey Radio. This is episode number 396, Dealing with Bitterness. If you're viewing the program live, please join the chat. Tell us where you're from. If you're viewing the program at a later date, just go ahead and leave a comment below and let us know where you're from, because that will help us with the algorithms. Now, as I said, I'm going to be kind of off the cuff today because I'm back and forth between this, right? Like every time I've done this kind of off the cuff stuff, it makes it harder for like the downstream process, because I mean the platform that I'm using to stream this, it's like it's recording stuff, but then I always find it's like there's post-production that I need before it gets to be of a level of quality that I actually want to put it and post it up on my channels on YouTube and Rumble. So, that's really the main reason why I'm not streaming directly to any platform like that. Because it's just once the broadcast is done, then boom, it's up, it's there and it's up. Which, I mean, I wouldn't mind it if the actual level of quality didn't require any post-production work, but it does, and so I don't want to have to put it up and then have it put up automatically and then take it down and then do the editing and then put it back up. To me, it's just simpler. It's like, look, if you're not ready to be put up, just don't put up in the first place. And so, yeah, that's why there's this little time to lag thing here. And um, yeah, so that's why, so I'm not streaming directly to those platforms. Perhaps that'll change someday. I don't know. Maybe this platform I'm using now will change, or maybe I'll change the actual platform I'm using again. I may be changing the platform I use again, actually, because there's some things about this platform that I don't like. For example, I can't play audio clips. I'd love to put more audio, like silly little things. But it doesn't, there's no way to put the audio in without like a video attached to it. And then uh, whenever I do play a video, it's like I can't comment while the video is playing. The video takes up the whole screen, and I can't comment on it while it's being played. So, and I really don't like that. So I would like this to be more interactive in the sense that I'm on the screen, the video I'm showing is on the screen, and I'm making comments on the video while the video is playing. I can start, stop, rewind, all that stuff. You see both things on the screen simultaneously. I think that'd be a huge help. But, I can't do that. Images, I can show images, but then it's treated like a video. It's like my mic gets cut off. And so I can't, in the way that it shows images, it's just, sometimes things get cut off and cropped in ways that I didn't crop it originally. So I have some images to share today with the program because I thought they'd be really helpful. So we'll see how that plays out. Again, the way that I had to finagle this to get it to go so you could actually hear me commenting while the image is there on the screen. I don't like that either. There's some things about that that I don't like, which we'll get to in a moment. But the whole program today is based on. Uh, I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this. I felt like I needed to do this, um, and I wanted to just talk off the cuff. Normally, this is more scripted, and it comes out very well. It helps me make video clips after if I can do it scripted. It's harder to make the clips when I don't have the script because I never. It's harder to know where to start and stop and plan everything out. But it just comes out a lot more smoothly if I can get the script out, and then of course there's just so much of this production work that needs to happen. People don't realize how much it takes to actually create new content and to get it to like a professional grade level. But be that as it may, that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today we're here to talk about dealing with bitterness as Latter-day Saint singles. And there's a lot of us that for a lot of us this is a constant challenge, right? Because you're dealing with an unmet need. On not only an unmet need, but it's doubled because you're dealing with an unmet expectation. There's this life plan that all of us are given about how life is supposed to go, right? And for many of us who are single, our lives are not proceeding according to that plan, right? Uh, it's like I don't think any of us ever asked for this, right? Like those who are widowed, I don't think any of them were asking for their uh, their widow to die. I don't think any of them, for their spouse to die so that they could become a widow or a widower. Um, those who are divorced, I think most people, when they're there at the altar getting married, I don't think that they were like, yeah, but this is only for X number of years, and then we're just going to, separate and have our own lives. I don't think anyone goes into it with that. Um, so there's an expectation that's not being met. And it's certainly true for those of us who have never been married. And we're going to share today an example of a single sister who obviously has never been married. And I feel nothing but empathy and compassion for her because that's the situation that I've been in for quite a while. And so, it's something that we're going to talk about today because it's something that I don't think is unique. I don't think it's something that is, um, I don't think this is something that plagues only a few people. I think this is something that plagues a lot of people. And we need to get our arms around this. Now, the short and the end of it is that when you take the restored gospel of Jesus Christ and apply it to your life, you have genuine joy in your life. And there are uh, hardships and troubles that come to everyone, no matter what your situation is in life, no matter where you're from, all this stuff. I mean, part of mortality we know is intended to be challenging by design because part of the reason why we're here is to grow and to progress and to become something that we weren't before. And I think many of us who are single, we understand that, but we get that confused and we conflate that with the whole getting married and having children thing, which is a part of the plan, the life plan that we've all been handed down by our culture. And so, when those expectations are established and they don't get met, it's very, very easy to become embittered. And that bitterness sends out a negative energy that is actually making the situation worse, not better, right? Because you would think that, you know, someone who has this unmet expectation of not having a companion will, a good way to resolve that is to, bring a companion into that person's life and therefore meet that expectation and meet that unmet need. But when you send out negative energy, Who wants to be around that? Right? So, what companion is going to come into your life when you're feeding out negative energy? It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're actually shooting yourself in the foot. Very often, you know, we are our own worst enemy because we're not doing the things that put us in the right places and invite the right people to cross our paths. And that's part of what this program is all about, helping us to turn that around so that we can be in the right places and that we can, attract the right people into our lives so they do cross our paths. And we can actually, find joy in the process of doing all of that. We don't have to have that need completely met before we feel joy. We don't have to have that expectation completely met before we start feeling joy. We can feel joy along the way. So let's just dive into this. So I want to see if I can throw this up here on the screen. Beautiful, beautiful. So um, this is about as big as it comes. I wish this were bigger, but that is what it is. So let me explain what we're looking at here. So, as part of the DC Singles Conference that was held last month, the conference was using this app called Huva, and there was a whole forum of all sorts of different topics inside the app where people were having all kinds of conversations, and people were so eager to have the conversations, which kind of made me excited because it's like that's the whole reason why I created Join the Journey Radio, and yet everyone I asked to come on the program says no. It's almost like, well, we'll go ahead and, where we have some sense of anonymity because we don't have to confront people face to face, but don't you dare put my mug on the screen and have it be on the internet forever. Oh no, we can't have that. We don't want to talk about these issues that much. Eh, I digress. Let's talk about this. So what we're looking at here is a comment that was made in a forum about the single scene. And, it was like, is the single scene really that bad? Or, is there something else going on here? Fascinating conversations. And of course, being who I am, host of Join the Journey Radio, I couldn't resist jumping into that conversation. So, what we're seeing here is something that was held toward the end. So, June 20th, this is obviously a few days after the conference had concluded. So, I mean, the app was kept open after the conference. It's still open today, actually. We're here, more than a month, uh, almost a month and a half after the conference is concluded, and yet, the app is still, there's people still active in the app, having conversations, which I think is a fantastic addition to the conference. So anyway, we're looking here at obviously a single sister. You'll notice that I blotted out the name there at the top. And I thought about whether or not I should do this. And at the end, I decided we're talking here about someone who's not being at their best. And I just thought, let's not do anything that would potentially embarrass somebody. So let's just blot out the name. And the name's not even pertinent to the conversation. And that's what I really want to talk about is the conversation. Now, the reason why I'm selecting this particular sister is because she made a number of comments in several forums that is basically basically you read between the lines. It's not hard to see what's going on with this poor sister. She is engulfed in bitterness. So here's what she said in this particular forum. As we saw and heard from this particular DC Singles Conference, the single scene is so bad that even Sister Kristen Yee will acknowledge it or be our voice in the church, since us childless singles have zero resources or support groups to turn to on our crap days. There's a lot to dive in here, dig in here. So let's do that. First, as we saw and heard from this particular singles conference, well, if you were to I'd just, find a way to actually just scroll through this stuff so you could actually see it. But if you were looking at the conversation that took place in this particular forum before this particular moment, you're looking at some very positive changes in the conversation. And I'm glad to say that I was a part of that Some people were it's evident that some people were thinking in typical ways that just were running them into habits that don't lead anywhere good, that lead to frustration, that lead to a feeling of emptiness, loneliness, despair, despondency. And you have to change that up and turn that around. Even if you look at, this particular comment, which is rather negative, this is at odds with the conversation that was being had before she came in and put this in here. The conversation had actually turned out very positive, very uplifting, very ennobling, very encouraging. And so this comment right here, she's coming into this forum that is it turned mostly positive, and she's making this comment and just putting a negative cloud that dampers the whole atmosphere of the conversation that had been established up to this point. Isn't it interesting how that's what people do, right? And I think people do this because it's sort of like an indirect way of crying out for help. Like people don't want to actually just be straightforward about it and say, I'm in need of help. Can you please help me? No, what they do is they do stuff like this. And I think this is a perfect example of the need that all of us have, that when we're interacting with other people, we need to see through the eyes of compassion and empathy. We need to see through the lens of needs. So when I look at this through the lens of needs, I very clearly saw this as, okay, here's somebody who's in pain, who's obviously in pain and hurting. And can you blame it? Can you really blame her? I mean, how are you not supposed to be in pain when your focus is on bitterness, when your focus is on what you don't have, when your focus is on what didn't happen, when your focus is on your failure and improbability, when your focus is on lack? How do you not feel emptiness? As we said here on the program countless times, your focus determines your reality. So when you focus on emptiness, how are you? How is it that you don't have a reality that's not lacking? The one leads to the other. So I'm reading this particular comment here. So as we saw in her for this particular conference, so she's just ignoring all the context of the conversation that she's entering in, putting a negative comment into something that's mostly positive. The single scene is so bad that even Sister Christian Yi will acknowledge it. Um, so here she's making reference to Sister Yi, who actually did come to the conference. There was a speaking engagement that she gave on Saturday afternoon that was competing with other workshops and things to do on Saturday afternoon. I ended up attending. I didn't originally intend to attend that, but I did, and it was very uplifting. And then there was main talk that she gave on Sunday afternoon, which was right after sacrament meeting. So there's a sacrament meeting that we held. It was in the DC Temple Visitor Center. So they're in the auditorium, they're in the visitor center. And we had this, sacrament meeting, which was really cool. And then after the sacrament meeting, she was a speaker. So they let us get up and walk around for a few minutes and whatnot. And then um, you know they introduced her, and she gave a wonderful, fantastic address. Um, but she was actually talking about, well, she talked about a lot of things, but one of the things that I think this particular person who's making this comment had reference to was a comment that the same person made before that Sunday meeting was held. So as part of the app that the conference was using, people could actually ask questions of people who are going to present at the conference before the presentation. And this was a fantastic way for the people who were making presentations at the conference to interact with conference attendees, um, you know, not just during their presentation, but before the presentation and also after the presentation. Now, Sister Yi did not respond or reply to any of the comments that were made to her speaking engagement. Uh, I don't know why. I mean, I'm kind of leaning to thinking there must be some policy that general authorities have about speaking and how they interact with people. That's all I can think of. I mean, why wouldn't you want to respond to this? So let me fast forward here. So here we've got the next thing up. So here we've got this is the comment that this same person, notice I still blotted her name out, but this is the same person who's making this comment to the inside the app, and this is to Sister Yee's Sunday afternoon speaking address session, whatever you want to call it. With zero examples of single women like us in the scriptures who yearn for children of their own, how do you feel with the deal with the gut-wrenching reminder every 28 days that you are still condemned to the sidelines in church culture? Can you recommend any resources, websites, books, podcasts, or specific general conference talk that has helped you in our unique life situation? Again, lots to unpack here, but it helps to develop some context for the mindset of this individual before she was making that comment before. Because if you look here, you can see that the date on this is the 4th of June, which was about a week and a half before the conference started. So you can see the mindset here. And so if we come back to the comment that this same person was making later, June 20th, so you can see that after experiencing all the uplifting things that a single adult general authority had to share with us, which I thought was quite uplifting and ennobling, she's still stuck in this mindset of focusing on the negative, focusing on what she doesn't have, focusing on, and this is the thing, it's like you're making a choice out of habit, right? No one's got a gun to your head saying you will be negative. No, no, you're making a choice. You're making a choice, and the choice that you're making is part of a habit that you're continuing to play out in your head. I mean, every time you do this, you're not consciously saying, okay, here's an opportunity to be positive. I'm still going to be negative. Ha ha! No, this is a choice that's being made out of habit. This is a choice that's being made out of habit. And you chose the habit. Like most of us, when we create habits, we're not like conscious of the habit that we're creating. We're not conscious and self-aware in that moment when we create the habit. It's just something that's just done. And then we just play it out. Okay. So obviously this person has a habit of focusing on the negative, of focusing on what she doesn't have. And so that's playing out that every time, she meets something that triggers that habit to play out, the habit then plays out. And then, the result is a continued focus on the negative, a continued focus on, what you don't have, a continued focus on, this unmet need, this unmet expectation. And so the reality that follows that is accordingly negative. It's depressing. It's discouraging. It's demoralizing. It's full of despair and hopelessness. And the way to get out of that is to change your focus because even though you're playing out this habit of negative energy, you still have a choice. You still have agency. You can make a different choice. When you see this playing out in your head, you can exercise some self-awareness and say, whoa, wait a minute. Is this really someplace I want to go? Where will this lead? Will this lead me to the same old, same old? Will this lead me to continuing to feel depressed, continuing to feel hopeless? And if so, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something different. Okay? I'm going to do something different. But there's something else in her comment that I wanted to go back to. So again, this is setting up the context for the mindset of this individual. She starts out with zero examples of single women like us in the scriptures who yearned for children of their own. And my first impression when I read that is, well, obviously you haven't read the Old Testament. There are plenty of examples of single women who yearn to have children of their own. And just because the people who are writing the text from which we get the scriptures, you know, just because, they chose to focus on certain aspects and they chose to place importance on, certain perspectives, That doesn't mean that there wasn't more to see. That doesn't mean that there aren't other perspectives that are equally, if not more, valid than the ones that were chosen by the writers who produced the texts that were then later used to form the scriptures that we have today. With zero examples of single women, uh, I'm sorry. The first example that comes to my mind when you're talking about single women who yearned for children of their own is the story of Jacob and how he had to work 7 years for Rachel, and then he got tricked and got had her older sister Leah, and he had to work 7 more years for Rachel. 14 years, right? That this woman Rachel was you know single and yearning for children of her own, and it must have been galling on her those last 7 years, because I guarantee you Leah was not waiting 7 years before she started popping out kids. So here she is, she's seeing her sister having children with the man who wants to be with her. And, you're sitting here saying, well, I don't have this man in my life who's supposed to fulfill this expectation of being married with kids, which is the mark of belonging in the traditional culture that we have in Latter-day Saint society. And you're sitting here, focused on what you don't have because you want to belong. And that's perfectly normal, by the way. I'm not condemning that at all. It's perfectly normal for people who don't fit in, who don't have that mark of belonging, to want to belong. But this is where, we see a need for cultural change. And I got to tell you, I see the culture changing. I do. I really do see the culture changing. The mark of belonging is changing to making keeping as many covenants as you can. It's changing to discipleship because everyone can be a disciple regardless of what your life situation is, right? So anyway, Rachel's just one example. By the way, she still had problems after she did get married to Jacob because she wasn't having kids there for a while. And you can read the account in Genesis where it talks about her taking herbs which were thought to actually improve fertility in women. The whole mandrake thing. What do you think that's about? Right? She's trying to have kids. You can kind of read between the lines, you know, how, they're in her frustration, after all these years of struggle with this issue, that she comes back to Jacob and says, well, maybe you're the problem. And he's like, honey, ain't nothing wrong with my plumbing. Look what I've been doing with your sister. Right? Like if I were the problem, your sister wouldn't be able to produce children. So obviously there's nothing wrong with my plumbing. Of course, she's not said exactly that way. But, I just you read between the lines. You can understand, you can feel the tension that's going on there in those relationships. There's another example from the Old Testament that comes to mind. If you fast forward to 1 Samuel, where it talks about Hannah, who, you know, she was childless. She wanted a child. I'm, it's, you know, it's not an aspect that's focused on a whole lot because, again, of perspectives that the writers of the scriptures were taking when they wrote their texts. But, to say that nobody wants to talk about this is ridiculous. You know, now read this comment here. How do you deal with the gut wrenching reminder? Can you recommend any resources, websites, books, podcasts, or specific general conference that has helped you in our unique life situation? Well, woman, I can recommend this one. I can recommend this one, this program, and that's that. Now, of course, with this established the context, this establishes the context for this comment that she made in the forum, right? And she's obviously not taking joy because she talks about her days being crap, right? She's talking about her days being crap, you know. Uh, Acknowledge it and be our voice since us childless singles have zero resources or support groups. Now this is after I was making the announcement there in the app in the conference. Say, hey, there's this program here. And even though I had conversations with some people, this is the thing that just gets me, right? 'Cause you've got um, people who are in pain, and obviously this person's in pain. But to say there's zero resources or support groups, and then when I go out and tell people about, hey, I've got this program called Join the Journey Radio, please come join us, and you know nobody, I mean, constantly, I mean, many of my videos get zero views, and constantly, I have this live forum set up where people can come in and join via the chat, and yet people are just not doing it. It's like, this is the part that I'm not getting. It's like it's easier for you to sit there and sit in your little, your bubble and complain about how things aren't what you want them to be. And yet when you find out about something that could actually change something, what do? The answer is nothing. You stay there in your little comfort zone that is not going to lead you to the place where you want to be. Because if you were in the place that you wanted to be inside your comfort zone, you wouldn't have anything to complain about. Zero resources or support groups. I had to chime in. I had to chime in. So here's what I said. Here's my response, which I made a couple of days later after I saw her comment. I respectfully disagree. To quote Hamlet, there is nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Much of the pain we singles feel comes directly from our habits of thinking and underlying assumptions. When you change your thinking habits to be more effective, it is easier to feel genuine joy in life despite having unmet needs that cause pain. Sister Yi was indirectly speaking to this very point when she said that there is no divine designation of YSA or SA, but that we are all children of God, and this identity is what matters most. When I read your comment, I sense pain and unmet need. That is part of the reason behind why I started what has become my weekly internet broadcast called Join the Journey Radio. I want to provide singles with a resource to resolve their pain and experience the joy that the scriptures and modern day prophets say we should be experiencing. Come join me and be part of the solution. It'll feel much better than wallowing in bitterness. So, before I actually, put out and made this response, I actually sat there and thought for a moment about what's the best way to approach this individual. Because again, I'm looking through the lens of needs. I'm looking through the lens of needs, and it's very clear from the comment this woman was making that she has a need that's not being met. She has an expectation that's not being met, which makes the unmet need doubly painful. And I could feel the pain. I could sense it because, as I've said many times on this program, and I've shared with my audience many times, that, I've been single for decades. I've been single for a long time, never been married. So when she talks about, not fitting into that traditional culture, honey, I'm right there with you. I'm in the same boat, but I'm not in the same state that you're in. I'm probably just as single as you are, but I feel a lot better about my situation than you do. And that's the thing that I came to a long time ago is that, once I started putting these things together, the things that I'm sharing on this broadcast, I started to understand that, it may or may not help me to resolve the expectation, the unmet need. Um, we weren't intended to go through life alone. I totally agree with that. The declaration in Genesis that it is not good for man to be alone. Well, I live with that truth every single day. I know it intimately well, but the way that we feel about reality is largely a measure of the meaning that we ascribe to reality. And that meaning that we ascribe to reality, the way that we interpret, what does that reality mean? That's a choice. That's a choice that we can all make. And I found that it's really easier to make a choice that puts me in a better emotional state, a more positive emotional state. When, I adopt these habits of thinking and the habit and the assumptions that underlie those habits, when I start to examine what's going on up here in my head, when I start looking at those habits of thought that I was talking about earlier and gaining some self-awareness and saying, hey, am I going to continue to focus on what I don't have, on what I can't do? And if I shift that over to what I do have and what I can do, then I can put myself in a different situation. And this whole discussion is a good example of that very principle because I'm confronting this right here, right? I confront this right here. And I'm saying, here's somebody who's in pain. Here's somebody who is exuding negative energy. And so I have a choice. I can join this person and have a negative focus, or I can choose to have a completely different focus altogether. And I can say, hey, why don't you come join me over here in positive land? Why don't you join me in thinking about, what it is that I'm going to be doing? And ask yourself, where does this lead? You know, Sister Yi, I mean, this is the thing I was referencing here with her address, is that she kept talking about this whole thing with identity and how we need to be um, continually, choosing to identify ourselves first as children of God. It's something that we've heard from other general authorities, and um, it seems to be the way that they're addressing the singles issue, for lack of a better descriptor. Uh, yeah, for the singles issue inside the church, and it's not entirely ineffective. It is true that, I mean, their focus determines your reality. So if you focus on that identity first, then what results is a reality that's a whole lot more joyful than the one that many of us are living in. Something Sister Yi also said, and this is something I made a point here to mention, is that these designations that we have in the church, she said there's nothing divine about them, which I thought was very insightful. She said there's nothing divine about them. They're just designations that are used to help us administer and minister to people inside the church. That there's nothing about eternity that they're reflecting. Um, which I thought, we need to mention that more. We need to mention that a whole lot more. YSA and SA are not divine designations. Uh, we're all children of our Heavenly Father. And, quite frankly, this ties into something that I shared, often on the program as well, is that we need to get away from seeing each other through anyway with the way God sees us. We need to see each other as God sees us. We're so quick to put these, generational lenses on and say, well, okay, all you 20 somethings should be together, and all the 30 somethings should be together, and you 40 somethings should be together. And this whole generational lens that we insist on using is clouding our vision because we're not able to see each other as we really are and who we really are, what we really are, children of our Heavenly Father. We're brothers and sisters in a great family of humanity. And we're letting, some silly little thing like age hold us back from having positive effects and bringing blessings into the lives of other people and allowing other people to bring blessings into our lives because we're so insistent on assembling with people who are exactly like us. And that's the other thing I notice about her comment. I mean, if you look back here, she's so focused on her particular situation. Us childless singles have zero resources or support groups. Um, can you recommend anything that has helped you in our unique life situation? She is so focused on herself. And this is another reason why she's so entrapped in bitterness and negative energy because her sights are focused inward. And that's not how you get joy. Joy is not found by focusing inward. Joy is found on focusing outward. This is clearly exemplified by the example of the Savior. Would you describe our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ as a bitter individual? I don't think so. I don't think anyone would come to defining him as anything close to bitterness. Rather, very much the opposite. His focus was never on himself, but always pointed outward to others. Those two facts are not disconnected. In fact, they're intimately intertwined and interconnected. Joy can be had regardless of your life situation, and a big part of that is focusing outward. And again, that ties in with what's going on up here in your head. What's going on up here in your head? Where's your focus? You choose your focus. You choose the habits that put you in a certain frame of mind, that put you in a certain emotional state. You choose. So yeah, I am sensing pain and unmet need. And I just thought that the best way to respond to this was to say, look, come, come join me. Come join me and be a part of the solution. Instead of complaining and sitting there and wallowing in your mire about how bad everything is, well, come join me. Let's work together to help make it better. And it really will feel much better than wallowing in bitterness. Now, she saw this comment and she responded to it fairly quickly. So here I am, June 22nd, 7:28 p.m. She responds the same day at 8:11 p.m., right? So almost an hour later, she responds and she says, I will. Just remember there is a big difference in being single divorced with kids and the other kind that nobody wants to talk about, let alone acknowledge. So here's something that, I read this and I'm just like, okay, first of all, the first part, I will. I want to declare here that she hasn't done what she said she would do because I haven't seen her in the chat. I haven't seen, uh, you know, her comments in the videos that I post on YouTube and Rumble. She said she would join. I haven't seen her come up. She hasn't joined any of the live broadcasts. I know she hasn't watched the content. And how do I know this? Because many of my many of my videos get zero views. So how is it that you say you're joining me when you're not even consuming the content that I'm producing? You know, I, I'd love to give you here on the program. Let's have a discussion about it. I'm a little trepidatious about that because, you might feel a little embarrassed and I don't want to shame anybody, So, I mean, but hey, if you were willing to come on the program, hey, let's come on and talk about it. I think you'd make some great content that would really help a lot of people, right? But she hasn't done it, and of course, until she does, she says I will. But until she does actually do what she says she's going to do, nothing's going to change. She's staying inside her comfort zone, and her comfort zone is playing out these habits that are causing her pain. Because here's the thing about habits, people: you will continue to play whatever habit you have, irregardless of what your environment is. That's the way you're biologically hardwired. When you get a trigger event that's connected with that habit, the trigger goes off, boom, you start playing out the habit. That's just what it is. And it doesn't matter whether, the habit is fitted or ill-fitted for the environment in which you find yourself. You could be in pain that is caused by your ineffective habit. And what's going to happen when you get that trigger event? You're going to keep playing that habit. You're going to keep playing it out even though it's causing you pain because you are biologically hardwired to play out habits. So you need to really step back, gain some self awareness, and start asking yourself some really hard questions about the habits that you have and the assumptions of your thinking that underlie those habits. Because until then, you're just going to keep playing out the same old. And it's just going to lead you to same old, and nothing will change in your life. You want things to change, you have to change the way you think. That's just the bottom line. Just remember there's a big difference in being single divorced with kids and the other kind that nobody wants to talk about. See, she won't even describe her situation in the same way she describes this, being single divorced with kids. It seems obvious to me with this comment, that's all she hears people talking about. But she doesn't hear people talking about her particular life situation. And she doesn't even describe it in, banal terms the way she describes this, being single, divorced with kids. She just, look at the word she uses, the other kind that nobody wants to talk about, let alone acknowledge. Words that we use betray the way we think. And the way this woman is thinking is that she is irrevocably condemned. No wonder she's exuding so much negative energy. No wonder she's exhuming so much, yeah, bitterness. She's engulfed in it. She can't help it. It's like she'd be better tarred and feathered. Because at least, that you can pick the tar off and eventually, you'll heal from that. But this just keeps going because it's fueled by these ineffective habits of thinking she's got up there in her head. The habits just keep going and boom. And even though it's, I'm presenting to her a solution right here. I'm presenting to her a solution right here. This is how you feel joy. Come join me. Be part of the solution. Positive. Feel better. And what's her response? She says she will. She doesn't. And then she gives us this statement, which shows that she's really enmeshed in that bitterness. Peeps, if you're feeling what this woman's feeling, it's not going to change until you change. And the most important change you can make in yourself is with the way that you think. You have to change the way you think about things. You have to change the way you think about your life. You have to change you have to change the habits that you have adopted. That when you go off and, you see something that triggers you and you have to have it triggered in a different direction. You have to address that because if you don't, nothing else is going to change for you. Now, here's my response to her, right? Because remember, look at what she said. Like this is 8:11 p.m., right? So here I am responding 8:25 p.m. So I saw what she wrote, took a little while to think about what she was saying, how should I respond, right? I said that's not been my experience that no one wants to talk about it, and it hasn't. I mean, this part of my frustration with this forum is that I put this out because I see people do want to talk about their issues, and yet who's joining me here? Who's joining me here? But I say, hey, welcome, welcome. It's like, hey, I disagree with you. I'm thinking a different way, but hey, that's okay. We don't have to think the same way for me to welcome you in. right? And anyone else who wants to join is welcome also. It's high time we all started to act rather than be acted upon. Again, if all you're doing is just saying, woe is me, and playing the victim, you'll never conquer your challenges. If you want to conquer your challenges, you have to be a victor, not a victim. And victors, those who are victorious, aren't victorious because it was thrust upon them, as we read in Shakespeare's play Twelfth Night. That character Feste, who's supposed to be the fool, oftentimes in Shakespeare's plays, the fools say the most profound things. And here we have the fool Feste saying, you know, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. And that's what many of us are waiting for. We're sitting here in our comfort zone, waiting for greatness to be thrust upon us. It's high time we all started to act rather than be acted upon. Because the truth of the matter is, the greatness you want for your life, you'll never find that if you're just waiting to be acted upon. The only way you get that, the only way you are a victor and not a victim, is if you act. And the action that we most need to take is to be self aware and look at how we're thinking. Look at the habits of thought that we have. Look at the habits of action that we're playing out based on that thinking. Go back and say, well, why am I thinking this way? Well, you're thinking that way because of certain things you're assuming to be true. And that plays into the whole thing of unmet needs. You've got unmet needs. You have an unmet need because you're thinking, oh, I should be married by now. You're assuming that you should be married by now. Now, maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. You won't know until you start questioning. And when you start questioning those assumptions that you have that underlie your thinking, it's easier to make changes. It's easier to make changes toward habits of thinking that are much more effective. I'm telling you, peeps. I mean, seriously. I mean, if you really want to, um, if you really want to change things around in your life, you can change it. You can change it, but you have to act. You have to act. You know, and this woman, God bless her. God bless her. I feel her pain. I really do. But notice how she said she's going to join, and she hasn't joined. I bet you she's still bitter because until you start doing things differently, you're never going to feel differently. You're never going to look at your life differently. You're never going to have hope about the future, which is something different than what many Latter-day Saint singles have. And the reason why they don't have that is because they're choosing to be acted upon rather than choosing to act. Don't you be that way. Don't you be that way. When you start to realize what it really means to be a child of God, when you really understand what that means, you'll know that is something worth fighting for. I pray you gain that vision so that you start fighting for yourself. Reach for the joy that's right there in front of you. And you can have it if you just change the way you think. And that's what we talk about all the time here on this program. So there's lots of resource here. There's lots of resource here. And I'm willing to help any of you that are out there. All you got to do is reach out. When you do, you'll find that there's so much more joy in your journey. Well, that's all we have for the program today. I thank everyone for participating. Uh, Certainly, I'm looking at the chat. There's nobody here. Um, that's okay. I'm still going to do what I'm going to do. You know, you know, if there's something that you want to say about the things that I've shared today, please leave a comment down below. If there's, a particular topic or question that you want to see addressed, happy to help. That's why Join the Journey Radio is here. Leave a comment down below. If there's something that we can do to help you overcome the challenges of LDS singles life, then yeah, you got it. Leave a comment down below, right? You could also use the contact page that we have on our website, jointhejourneyradio.com. Go to the contact page there, and there's a form where you can send us a message. Fill it out, send us a message. And if that's the way you want to contact us, have it that, right? Because then people don't have to read what it is you're writing in the comments, right? So if you want to give us a message that you don't want anyone else to read, there's a way to do that, right? Again, I'm trying to open up and build as many bridges as I can to say, hey, you need help. Come, access it. That's why this program exists. And as always, please remember, like, share, subscribe. I mean, the algorithms can push our content to help out so many people, but you got to act and not be acted upon. So, yes, please like, share, subscribe, help the algorithms to push our content out to more people so more people can be helped. And, you know, again, that's all we've got for this episode of Join the Journey Radio. So until next time, this is your host reminding you there is joy to be had all along your journey. So take that joy and journey on.